Cool. Well, welcome, friends. It is the time has come. It is our last lecture ever, at least for this course. Congratulations, you did it. All of you guys have crushed it. Really, really pleased with exam results. Really, really pleased with just how you guys have handled yourself. And it's just, want to say it's been my pleasure to be your instructor. I know that I was out for like a week and a couple days here and there. So I appreciate your flexibility, and I know that you guys were in good hands with everybody that came in to teach, and just grateful for Garrett for being such a remarkable TA. But yeah, it's been really my pleasure to work with you guys. I put this in Discord, and you should get a prompt as well from like a survey perspective. But if you guys can, if you have time today, tomorrow, Saturday, feel free or please fill out this end of stack survey. Again, it helps Garrett and I know what do we do well, what can we work on, what is your overall experience. But again, it has been my pleasure to be your instructor and to walk through JavaScript with you guys. I hope that you guys can look back, especially in this season of the holidays and stuff can get crazy, and just be really proud of yourselves. When you guys got into this, you probably didn't, unless you did, maybe you did, had no experience in Node or Express or React. And, kind of looking back on, I always tell students to, like, how impressed would your old self be with your current self's knowledge, right? Sitting and being like, oh, they're creating components, you'd be lost, right? Or if I tried to have you do the belt exam in React, day one, you'd probably panic. But it's just more of a testament of your learning, your tenacity, nothing I do, right? Or nothing Garrett did, but it's your hard work. So be kind to yourself. Just look back. It's always a good practice to be like, wow, I have learned a lot in these last 8-9 weeks, because we had a week break for Thanksgiving. So you should be really proud of yourself for that. Okay. Again, today is a little bit what I call career talk. It's more so just things I wish I would have learned, encouragements for you guys, especially you're entering into a weird little season. Not weird, but more of a different time, because you're not just going to go straight into your next stack. You guys have a little bit of a break. And so I think personally, I've done this. This is my fourth, I guess, year like this, teaching where you're going into a break. You guys have an advantage, in my opinion, because you actually have 2 weeks to kind of start that process, especially if you're going to projects and algorithms. You have 2 weeks to start that process and start getting, so two things, you can kind of start getting your resume, everything complete, ready, working. And second thing is, Q4 is a really tough time to try to enter the market, which is, October through December. Q1 and Q2 are optimal times to enter the market. That's when budgets are approved. That's when companies are trying to now hire. Everybody's been fired or laid off because they're trying to get the stock price well by the end of Q4. And then now they go, oh, we just spent a bunch of money firing people, but let's rear it back up. And we have all these new projects that got funded. Now we got to hire people. So you guys are in a really sort of advantageous time, in my opinion, to jump into the market. And so there's a couple things that I would encourage you guys to do. One of them is I would take a little bit of a break. Take, 3, 4, 5 days if you want. Just relax. Do something that's really filling to you. Go to the gym, go for a run, do art, build Legos, I don't know, whatever that is for you. Do that, something that gives you a little bit more energy. If you feel burned out, that's very normal. If you feel nervous going into it, that's also even more normal. That is a normal feeling, where you feel like there's literally a syndrome. It's called imposter syndrome. So if you're feeling that and you're like, oh man, I'm about to enter the job market and I know nothing, I oftentimes think I know nothing. Most developers who've been doing it for 5 years, 10 years, feel like they know nothing. Imposter syndrome is current throughout the market. That's always a thing. So I think just knowing that oftentimes can help you when you're feeling those moments. You're like, no, I do know stuff. Again, that's where looking back and saying, wow, what I know now compared to 9 weeks ago is insane, right? You can learn so much in 9 weeks. You guys are all capable of that. So, but give yourself a little bit, but don't give yourself too long. I know that's kind of a weird thing, but if you take the entire 2 weeks you're going to come to your personal project. And it's, even if you're doing it in React, you're gonna be like, how do I do that again? What am I supposed to use? It is a muscle that you have to constantly be kind of working out. And so I would encourage you guys, don't go too long without coding. I think a week is fine. But if you get into that 2 week mark, beginning of the year, I have seen students where they kind of just take the 2 weeks off, which if that's your choice, that's your choice. You guys are all adults. But then really it's hard to kind of get going again. It's hard to get energy. You get a little bit of senioritis because you're like, I just got one more stack and I'm graduating. This whole thing's done. But really, unfortunately, you guys are just beginning, right? You have to jump in the job market if that's what you're going for. Jump to the job market, and that in itself is its own sort of thing. So I would just to be able to prevent that, give yourself enough time to feel a little bit rested, but not too much time to where it's a little bit harder. It's like having a car sit. You know, you want to let the engine chill for a bit, give it a break, but you don't want to let it sit for 10 years and then think it's just going to start up and run super duper fast, right? Cool. So what can you do in order to kind of learn some stuff? What can you do, or what would I do if I was in your position? Well, I would start defining and writing, okay, what do I want my personal projects to be? This is a time that you guys are going to build something for your portfolio, right? And portfolios, there's kind of two sides, right? Sometimes people are like, personal projects don't really matter that much. It's your knowledge, and if you know stuff, you can get in the company. I've seen that, and I see that in some cases. And then on the other side, you could say, personal projects is what people can look at and see that, hey, this is sort of a validation that you know things. When you are thinking about projects to do, my encouragement, and this is my encouragement, this is not law, is unless you want to be a game developer, which this course probably wasn't the most ideal for you if you want to be a game developer. But if you don't want to be a game developer, which that's primarily Java or C#, I would steer away from games. If you want to do that, if that's like your downtime, like I don't really want to like build a project, but me building some little Python game, it's just like fun and relaxing for me. Sure, that's fine. But for a personal project, I would probably steer away from a game. You'll be allowed to do it if you wanted, but I think so, because I think you'll have to you might not be able to, thinking about it, there might be some conditions, but again, I would steer away from games unless, again, you want to go into game development. The whole reason is because people want to see, can you build part of a project? What can you build? And games can, on one end, be like, oh, I'm creating a class and I'm creating instances of that class. Like, yes, I can see that connection. But you got to think, people who are kind of getting you through the door are not people who understand code. They are not people who understand tech. It is recruiters. Oftentimes, like I saw a meme where a developer will put languages and they put Pokemon, and then they just try to see if a recruiter could tell them which is a language, which is an actual technology, and which are Pokemon. Because recruiters don't know, because they don't know anything about tech. They just know, there's some buzzwords, some keywords. So again, they're going to be the ones looking, and they're going to think, oh, they made a game. They must be a game developer. They're not, if they're trying for LinkedIn or whatever, that's not what they do. They're just game developers. So that would be my encouragement. So kind of start thinking about what you would want. The other thing I would look at is, what are the jobs in your area, especially if you're a 3-stacker, what language has the most amount of jobs in your area? You might be in a space where JavaScript's pretty common. It's like one of the most top languages. Like if you go to Stack Overflow's developer, at the end of this year, all these developer insights are going to come out from GitHub and Stack Overflow of like what the favorite languages are, the top languages. It's always JavaScript, it's always Python, and it's something else. But looking at jobs in your area, going into Indeed and saying, okay, I'm going to go to Indeed, and we'll just kind of look it up. And then let's say software engineer or developer. Some people are purists, and they'll say an engineer is somebody who can engineer, do like handle data, handle structures, handle application setups, and developer somebody who codes. Other people will just say they're synonymous. So it's kind of up to you there. But, or not up to you, but it kind of just changes. So if you have that question, but I would sit and say, okay, great. Seattle. I'm looking at software engineers, university grads. I'm looking and I'm going to see, okay, I'm scrolling down software engineers, work with teammates, blah, 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 responsibilities. And then I'm seeing pursuing a bachelor's, but not limited to C, C++, C Sharp, Java, JavaScript, or Python. Okay. So that's JavaScript, Python, Java, or C Sharp, right? This is kind of a basic one. But if I keep looking, I want to look and see what are the trends, what are the things that they're looking for. Kubernetes, you are a JavaScript, TypeScript enthusiast with single page applications. We do that. And SSRs, which is server side rendering. Okay. Okay. So look, that's kind of 2 for JavaScript. And I would just keep doing that. I would just keep looking at, this is a front end job. You can kind of look at some salaries, a good idea. And I'm going to show you some salary stuff here in a bit. But like Colorado, Washington, New York, those all require the jobs to actually post the salaries. And so that's kind of, that can give you an idea, but I'm gonna give you another tool that can also do that. But I mean, it's front end. So you're looking at, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, basic understanding of UI. Okay, cool. So, JavaScript here in Washington area is a really popular thing, but you can kind of also decide, what do you like more? Do you like the front end, which is going to be more JavaScript, HTML, CSS, React, that kind of stuff, or some back end stuff like this one? Looks like C Sharp, Java, Node.js, or Python. Okay, great. With Express.js, Ruby on Rails, or Django. Okay. And kind of start doing some research. That's what I would do. Start doing some research and say, what is most popular in my area? But and then I would tailor projects around that. Now, obviously, if you don't know the language like Ruby, right? Don't go just try to like go learn Ruby. Just finding, okay, if you've taken 3 stacks, Java, Node, Python, and then tailoring your portfolio to match what is in your area. There are remote jobs available. They're a little bit harder to find now. Just gonna be super blunt, because with COVID, everybody was remote, and then with tech layoffs that's happened over the last year, a lot of developers want only remote jobs. And so one thing to sort of think about is, if you are willing to be more hybrid, that can actually give you an advantage. There's a lot of people who won't take a job if they have to go into office, which is sort of an interesting thing. So those are things to think about. So I would do some research over these next couple of weeks and say, what do I need to do, or what's kind of around my area here. Somebody asked a question: is there a difference between Rails and Ruby on Rails? I believe Rails is a sort of framework of Ruby. I'm not a Ruby developer. I've never written in Ruby, but in the same way that we have Express.js on Node.js, or Node.js on Express, it'd be like Ruby on Rails, or Python on Django, right? Or Django on Python, sort of thing. So that's what I would do, is I would look around and say, what's around my area, what's common. Again, if you're willing to be hybrid, that's awesome. Excuse me. That can also often help you. If you just want to be remote, that's fine. It might just be a little bit more challenging, especially depending on where you live. If you live in a really expensive area, it can be a little bit more challenging, because people aren't going to want to pay you more to be remote versus, if another candidate is living in Omaha, Nebraska, and you're in Seattle, right? You guys are sort of the same, but they can pay that other person because their COLA, their cost of living adjustment, is much lower, or there is none. Then they might go with that candidate. So those are things to think about when you are dealing with remote work. Now, a lot of students always ask, and they say, okay, you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of go independent contractor route. I'm just going to do something like a Fiverr, or I'm going to do something like an Upwork. That's fine. I'm not saying you cannot do that. What I would say though is it is a very, very, very saturated market. And oftentimes you will be undercut by people whose countries have a much, much, much lower cost of living. And so they can, them charging $100 for this really big project that you might charge $1,500 for, that might be equivalent to them, right? And so it's a very saturated market. Again, that's not just me trying to say don't do Fiverr, don't do Upwork. If that's something you want, then that's I would encourage you guys always, but those things to think about if you want to do sort of this, I want to go on my own, that's fine. Just might be a little bit more challenging to get clients. Start with Facebook or people around you. I know a lot of developers, and I did this when I first learned how to code. Coffee shops, real estate agents often need a website, something that you can kind of get up and running, and then you can go work for them. Just be like, hey, I noticed your website. I'd love to pitch you for $400. I can make it do this, and here's why that's a good investment, right? Getting people to a newsletter, and a newsletter gets your name out there, all that stuff. That's what I did, and got quite a few clients doing that, to where it's like, cool, I'm doing just a little bit of work. And oftentimes for those, you can use something like a Squarespace, a Wix, WordPress is really, really popular, to where you're not actually having to write a ton of the code. You're just having to put pieces together. And then if you need some sort of functionality, you have the idea and the understanding of, I can go into my CSS and I can change this to make it look X way, or I can go into JavaScript to make this functionality happen. So that kind of leads me into my next statement is you need to utilize your resources and those people that you know. This is the unfortunate truth. If you just send an email or a resume to a company, you have no affiliation. You don't know anybody at the company. You don't have a reference, especially if it's a big company like a Google, a Facebook, an Apple. The likelihood of you getting picked is very, very, very low. It is a lot about who you know. So growing your network is going to help you immensely. There's a guy named Danny Thompson, who has, he's a developer and is awesome. But he has this entire series that kind of goes through how to make your LinkedIn really, really, really appealing to people. And that sounds silly because you're like, LinkedIn, I don't want to do that. I'm the same way. I'm like, I haven't done it. I don't really want to do it. I'm in a good space now. But there have been countless people who have used this, and I have friends who have used stuff like this, not necessarily Danny Thompson, but really the power of LinkedIn. You can get connected with a lot of people. A lot of recruiters are on there, having network, commenting, following, stuff like that. Danny Thompson's got a great stuff on how to get a job using LinkedIn. There's a couple different things of like, oh, let's build out your LinkedIn so that way you are more approachable. I had a buddy who did that, and he gets cold emails from Amazon and Meta and Microsoft all the time. And he's like a customer success manager. So he's not even like in tech, but he'll just get an email like, hey, do you want to interview? And he interviews, and we'll go, and has moved companies and et cetera, et cetera. So growing your network is going to be really key to finding a job. So again, in these next couple of weeks, I would really say these next 6 weeks is a great time for you to grow your network by using stuff like LinkedIn. If there's meetups in your hometown, go to those. Obviously, I know that's the holiday season, but at like the month of January, there might be some meetups for coding. Go to those, meet people, talk to people, comment on people's LinkedIn. If you don't have a LinkedIn, believe Customer Career Services, I've already told you guys to build one. But I would really build one if you don't have one. It's pretty necessary, unfortunately, for your first job. And once you get your first, it's a lot easier now that you have some experience. But build out your network so that when you, and that's something I didn't do. I just thought like, oh, it'll be fine. I'll just apply to all these jobs. And I got some interviews. But the jobs that I really, really wanted, the times that I've moved and have gotten those jobs, was I just had a referral. And then that'll kind of automatically, the way it works typically is employees will refer you, and then you will at least get an interview or get to the first stage of interviewing. Whereas if you just sort of send out, there's a ton of videos, like I sent out 1,500 resumes and I got 0 responses. Yeah, that's normal, right? Because they don't know you, so it's getting sifted out. So really increasing your network is going to help you immensely. There are websites where people can give referrals. Now, I've never used one, so I can't say that they work. Totally up to you. But just know that that employees will get compensated if you get hired. So like when I was at Twilio, I referred somebody and they gave $3,000 because they got hired. And so I got into Twilio because I knew somebody, and that person got 3 grand. And so they want to find talent and they're willing to give people that. So, as long as you're not building a relationship solely so like, okay, cool, you work at Google, can I get a referral? That can kind of rub people the wrong way. But also, if you've built a relationship with people, just know that, they are incentivized to give referrals as well. So don't be afraid to be like, hey, do you know of anything? Or I found this job. It's a really great job. I think I'd be a great fit. Would I be bothering you if I asked for a referral? Now they might, it might just be a link that they generate or whatever that associates them. But again, if you get hired, they get paid. So $3,000 is a lot. I know some companies are like $500, but that is a way to do it. Let's talk about the interview process. Or let me stop there. Are there any questions on networking, on kind of what I think where you should go? Any questions there? Cool.
Well, just one thing to mention on top of all that, and I threw it in chat, but there's a module just on Sugi's platform of networking and basically building your resume. Specifically, there's one video, it's like 18 or 19 minutes long, where it's a guy within Coding Dojo who's really breaking down strategically how to set up your LinkedIn, what you can
Yeah.
do. And I found that very, very valuable as a student. So definitely take a look through those modules that we offer as well.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. Thanks, Garrett. So yeah, definitely check those out if you can. That'll be really, really helpful. Okay. So let's say that you are prepped, you're ready, you know what you're going to do, you've identified the market on what you're going to apply for. That doesn't mean you can't apply. Like if JavaScript is everywhere, one thing to note is, sometimes they will give you a ton of stuff. If you don't know, I mean, like here is like mobile application development. I've never done that. So maybe that's not the most optimal, but don't be like, let somebody else tell you no. Don't be the one to tell yourself no, would be my biggest encouragement. So even if you feel like, oh, maybe I don't fit the requirements because I've never written in TypeScript. Okay. But if you've fit a good amount of other things, of other, kind of stuff, obviously if you're going for like principal engineer at Google, yeah, maybe, use your time a little bit wiser. But don't let yourself be the one you like to tell yourself no, to prevent you from applying for a job. There's a ton of times that, people apply for jobs they are not qualified for and they still get an interview and then they are the most qualified candidate and then they get a job. So don't be the one to tell yourself no. I promise you, crazier things have happened. There's countless stories of that. So here's like 0 to 3 years. There's REST APIs, which is what we've built, dealing with MySQL. Power Automate, which is just an easy tool for Microsoft, right? And so you're looking, you're saying, okay, this is pretty good. Like I can do Python or C#. Like this is pretty easy. Okay, great, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, please don't be the one to tell yourself no. Let somebody else do that for you. So what does that look like? Let's say that you get a job interview. The way that it typically works, and every company is different, but it depends on the company size. And then it depends on, really company size. So if you're going with a startup, it's a little bit more Wild West. You might have an interview with an HR person. Some startups don't even have HR people. So you might just have an interview with like the CEO the first day, or the head of technology the first day, the CTO, chief technology officer. That might be because there's only 20 people there or 10 people there. Some startups have 700 plus people. One of my best friends works for a big startup. like 700 plus, double unicorn, meaning their valuation's over 2 billion. And then I worked for a startup that was like 20 people, right? They're both technically startups, but based on the level and the size, that can vary for sure. And then when you get to a little bit more established companies, companies with HR, companies that are publicly traded, so like your Twilios, your Facebooks, your Googles, any sort of larger company that will have somebody like an HR company, the way that it typically works is a few things. Either you're reached out by a recruiter, or you reach out to a recruiter, or you apply and a recruiter calls you. And then they, just so you know, anytime a recruiter reaches out to you, they also get paid if you get hired, right? So a recruiter is actually your friend. They're not trying to like screw you over and give you the less amount of money. Now you still have to advocate for yourself, but they are there to help you. My only thing would be cautious of scams, because if you post like, hey, I just graduated, there's a lot of people who will be like, hey, and I'll get this all the time on LinkedIn, like, oh, my visa's weird. Why don't I do the work? You'll get paid, and then you get to keep a portion of it. That kind of weird stuff. So just be cautious, right? If it's too good to be true, it oftentimes is too good to be true. If it sounds too good to be true, it oftentimes is. So just be cautious of that. But let's say that a company has like an HR company. They'll reach out, a recruiter will give, typically there's a phone screening. They're going to ask you some random questions, hey, are you a good culture fit? Are you a good, tell me about yourself, that kind of stuff. Career service managers have hopefully coach you guys through some of that stuff. And you have this phone screening. And then what will typically happen is you'll go on, if they like you and you kind of pass the test, then you'll go on to the next stage. And that can vary. Sometimes you go to a manager and you say, like the hiring manager, and they might interview you. Sometimes maybe it's like somebody on the team. And then the next stage is the hiring manager. Again, it varies. But just know that typically, especially with a large company, it's quite a few interviews. Like when I got hired at Twilio, there was 8 interviews in total. I went to a recruiter, and then I went to the hiring manager, and then I had another interview with the recruiter, and then I had a panel of 4 people. So 4 individuals throughout the company, and I just had back-to-back interviews. And then I had a final interview with the hiring managers / recruiter to like negotiate and see, is this going to be a good fit? And then I got hired, and then I got my offer. So it is quite a process. That's why I've been saying, go ahead and get started now, because scheduling people and doing that can take a month to 2 months to get hired. Sometimes it's faster. Again, if you're at a smaller company, they might expedite that process. I've been at companies where I interviewed twice and they offered me the job. Kind of depends on that. But one thing I would say is tools to learn is there are what we call whiteboarding portions of the interview. All a whiteboard portion is they're going to ask you some sort of algorithmic question, where they're going to say, hey, can you solve this? Or you have this question. Can you solve this via code? What they're looking for is they want you to be able to do a few things. Typically, it's like, hey, you have an hour. Can you solve 2 out of the 3 problems? And if you can, great, we can move forward. And if not, then this doesn't work out, right? You don't have the knowledge base that we're looking for. And that's a little confusing, because sometimes you can solve one, get really close to the second, and then still be like, you know what, we're going to move you forward. What they're testing is, how do you communicate? How do you think? How do you articulate things? How do you understand things? Do you think big picture, or are you too zeroed in on nuancy things? Can you anticipate what we call edge cases or unique things happening? So that's what's happening through these technical interviews. They're asking you questions, but they're learning a whole bunch of just how you operate and how you work. One of the big things they're going to look for is, how do you communicate? So if you just sit there and you're like, okay, I'm going to big brain it, and I'm just going to sit there and like Rain Man, look at it for a second and then go write code, that's not what they're wanting. What they're wanting you to do is think out loud and say, okay, I'm approaching this problem, just kind of off looking at it. I'm thinking it's going to be depth first search because X, Y, Z. If I'm going to use that approach, here's some tools that I'm going to think through. Here's some tools that I'm going to use. I know there's some libraries that'll help with that or whatever. And then you're just kind of communicating, here's what I'm thinking, here's what I'm doing, here's my edge case. You want to pseudocode, you want to think out loud. And I would practice this. I literally would practice this if I were you guys. As you guys are doing this, it sounds silly, even if you're by yourself, but practice talking out loud. Okay, here's what I'm thinking. Here's what I'm going to do. And you can even record yourself and be like, does this make sense? If I'm just somebody who didn't know, does this make sense? Because again, they're wanting to do that. And then at the end, that's when you finally write your code. So if you just jump in and start coding, that's not good. You want to process through, think of edge cases, think of unique things that can happen. And then you, once you've sort of sat down and be like, okay, I think I have a good plan. Now let's go ahead and code this out. That's awesome. The reason I said it can be, normally it's 2 out of 3, but it can be like 1 out of 3 is maybe you had a really great plan for number 2. You've thought about the edge cases. You had the right approach. You just ran out of time to code it. They know that you can code, especially with AI stuff happening. But they got to see your plan. They got to see how you thought. They go, okay, I trust that they would have figured that out. But technically they answered the question because they told me what they were going to do. They just didn't have enough time to do it. So that is a tool that I would use, or that's something that's called whiteboarding that is typically going to happen with any job. Now there is a list out there. I think it's on GitHub, or I think you can just Google like jobs that don't ask whiteboarding questions. And it's just companies that don't do that. It's a little bit antiquated. There's a whole thought that the hiring process for devs especially is really broken, which I think is true. Because oftentimes these whiteboards have nothing to do with the company, but they might also give you like a take-home exam. I've had that same thing as well. They're like, hey, this is actually an issue that we've dealt with in the past. How would you approach this issue? Here's what I'm trying to do. Here's your code, or here's your data. Go do it. And you have 4 days, or you got 2 days to like take it home, think through it, and then deliver some code. Obviously, that one's a little bit different because you're not trying to pseudocode or kind of talk through it. You're just taking home a project. I've seen both happen. Another tool that will be used, and so I would get familiar with this, is a tool called HackerRank. Some big companies, instead of even having like just honestly, instead of wasting a recruiter's time and having you do the phone screening for 30 minutes and they're paying for that, they might just send you, and I've had this when I kind of interviewed at Starbucks. My first round was they just sent me a HackerRank thing, and they'll send that and say, hey, maybe you're fresh out of a boot camp. We see that. We want to see, do you have the right knowledge before we sort of waste our time and resources, because it costs money to hire and interview people. Before we even before we even want to raise our resources, we're okay with spending $10 on you for HackerRank, because you fit some of it, and so they'll send you that, and the same sort of thing. You're just doing it on your own, but they'll ask you 2 questions. So if I were you, I would absolutely just get familiar with the process of HackerRank. Get familiar with how it works, what it looks like, the IDE, the edge cases, or the sort of test cases that they give you, the nuancy things, reading how to understand questions. That's going to be really, really big for how this works. So here, I mean, they even have an interview prep kit, so maybe do that. Maybe you have 3 months interview prep. There's 104 challenges. Great. I would maybe start there. I think if you go here, you're probably a little bit too soon. But again, you just want to see, how does this work? How does this operate? Because this is a really common tool. Lots of big companies just use HackerRank, and that's your whiteboard. So if you're familiar with it, not necessarily the question itself, because I don't think that they just give you randomized questions. HackerRank, Palantir, both of those companies gave me, or sorry, Starbucks and Palantir both gave me a HackerRank quiz as my whiteboarding portion of it, or as my technological, okay, cool, they know, and then we don't have to whiteboard, or we can think through that. Yeah. So get familiar with HackerRank would be my encouragement. There's also another tool that I wish I would have known. I just found out about this maybe, I don't know, 4 months ago. It's called NeetCode, because there's HackerRank and then there's LeetCode. And everybody, all the videos be like, I grinded LeetCode for 100 hours or whatever. It's just the same thing as HackerRank. It's just more questions. But there's this great company called NeetCode, or great person. It's just one individual. I created this website called NeetCode, and really all it is courses for you to understand this, just being blunt, you will learn about singly linked lists. There's a big focus in that. There's some stuff on trees. Um, I would say, and I just am often blunt about this, coding boot camps are really great at helping you learn how to code and write code. Where they lack, and it's known in the industry, where they lack is through data structures and system design kind of stuff, but really just data structures. Understanding how data works, understanding why you want to use this over that, understanding what big O notation is. You will have one lecture on big O notation, but it's not a huge theme. You will have to know what big O notation is for your job. If you have a, not for your job per se, but if you have a whiteboarding interview, you have to know what that is. You have to be able to say, I wrote this algorithm. Its time complexity is this, and its space complexity is this, right? How much time does it take to run it? If it goes on forever, and how much space does it take up? That kind of stuff. So I would really encourage you. There's a couple ways you can do it. Neat code's great. This person will give you a whole bunch of stuff. I think this is there's a pro version. I don't know how much it costs. I'm not saying that I'm advocating for you to pay for something. But it will give you some different things. Oh yeah, so I guess you have to pay for that. But this is a great way to kind of learn. Another one would be Udemy. So if you just go to like Udemy, there is, I have way too many Udemy stuff. There is one. I'm trying to find it. Again, these are all paid for. So you don't have to do this. There's plenty of free options, plenty of free stuff. Free Code Camp Online is a great one. I don't remember. There was one that was on algorithms. Anyways, you can go to Udemy, look up algorithms. You don't have to. If you ever do go to Udemy, never pay full price. They're always on sale. So at least wait 24 hours. If it's like 149 or anything above like $25, never buy that. It's always going to go on sale. So just note for Udemy. But understanding algorithms is going to be huge. There's a great thing here on Neat Code that is free, and it's called the roadmap. This is somebody who worked at Amazon, has a CS degree, worked at Amazon, quit, and then worked at Google. I don't know if they still work at Google, but something that they realized, I was even watching a video on it today, is that they wish that they would have learned. Yeah. Oh, I didn't know he quit Google. I knew he quit Amazon, but that, in order for you to understand dynamic programming, you have to understand backtracking. In order for you to understand graphs, you really have to understand trees. And so this is a great sort of roadmap, and it is combined with Leak Code. It's Neat Code, right? To where what it'll do is these are Leak Code questions, and you can come in and it just takes you to the question on Leak Code. Okay, I want you to do contains duplicates, given an array, given an integer array nums, return true. This is in Python. Or you can do it in Python. And then here's all the questions, right? A great thing. What's cool about Neat Code is they also have a video solution. And so they talk about, okay, here's the approach. Here's one way to do it. Here's a second way to do it. Here's the big O notation. Here's the time and space complexity, et cetera, et cetera. So this is a great way to learn your algorithms. This is going to be a big portion of what you should be doing the next couple of weeks. Again, you're going to learn some of this stuff, but I would say it'd be much better to get a much more in-depth knowledge of this sooner rather than later. Because if you're starting to get your, hopefully, again, people, you want to be prepared. So that way, let's say June 5th, some company gets, okay, we need to hire 20 developers, and you just happen to apply and they're like, cool, we're going to interview you tomorrow. You don't want to say, oh no, let me go back and learn all about all this data, all these data structures. No, you want to be prepared. You want to be ready, right? Even if, you get interviewed, sounds like Phone's got an interview tomorrow, hasn't even taken projects and algorithms yet, right? So maybe we're going to learn it, but start now. And that's what I would encourage you to do. So Neat Code's great. Leak Code's great. HackerRank, get familiar with those. Okay, I'm going to stop there, and then we're going to get into like the money portion. Any questions on any of that?
So, funny enough, I happen to have a group of friends who likes to do leak code problems every day.
Mhm. Awesome.
So,
That's great.
yeah, yes. Some of the challenges I ran into with my group in particular is that some of them are just like the idea of puzzle solving. They've never coded in their life. And others like were career engineers, right?
Mhm.
And the variation between what's like considered easy and medium and hard on leak code has been like huge, right?
Mhm.
So how would you, I guess, how would you be able to identify something that's good to start out with coming out of Coding Dojo?
Yeah, great question. I would say that's where this roadmap really comes in handy, just being super blunt. Because what you can do is you could say, like, okay, contains duplicates, and then they have this difficulty easy. And what you're saying is sometimes they're really easy. Um, and sometimes you're like, wait, this is actually really challenging. I don't know how to approach this, even though the difficulty says easy. This is where that sort of knowledge of understanding arrays and different intricacies of arrays, or like linked lists, doubly linked lists, stacks. If you have that knowledge of what a stack is, then that might be an easy problem. Um, but if you don't, then you, like what you're saying, Joseph, you might approach it and be like, I have no idea how to do this. And I think that is in its own way good. It's good to sit and be like, I know nothing about this. What's nice about this, in my opinion, is they walk through these videos. So it'll, if we're like watching, he like talks about why we sort, what this does, and at the end they show the code. So it kind of sounds silly. I would just jump in. Obviously, I would just do the easy ones, but if it's a challenging one, there's a lot of, if you go to like leak code, I mean, if you're doing leak code, then the odds are neat code has an explanation on it. So that's why I like this. Because you could just go to practice, and then there's a million problems that you can practice. So this is just the blind 75. There's the neat code 150 or neat code all. There's 450 explanations and videos of all of these questions. And so, you can look it up. And I would say just practicing, getting familiar with this is going to help you learn by doing that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. From what I understand, it's about knowledge unlocks. I'm hitting a wall for a reason. There's something to climb over.
Yeah, absolutely. And everybody hits a wall. There's another one that I did for a little bit and I liked it. It's called Algo Expert. Again, these are all paid for, so you don't have to. If you go to like YouTube and then you say something like free code camp data structures. Free Code Camp is an incredible tool, but there's like a full course for beginners. That's a 5-hour course on data structures, 8-hour course on data structures and algorithms in Python, a 12-hour course. So there is tons of materials. It's just something you're going to have to learn. And that sounds really sucky, but I think, but Free Code Camp, I believe, also has, hold on. Yeah, they also have algorithms and data structure cert. So you could hop in. This is in JavaScript. You could hop in and kind of do all of these different portions and build all this different stuff that they'll teach you. So it is a hurdle. It's just something you do have to kind of approach. And I think it's okay to sit and be like, I have no idea. And look at like an explanation. And what you can do, and this is kind of what I was going to go into next, is the way I would approach algorithms is, first off, get the question. Write what you think the answer is, right? Test it, right? Because you'll run it and then it's like, okay, cool. Once you submit and let's say that it works, then you're like, great, I found a good, like I finished it, right? Like, let's see. I don't know if I've done any of these. Now I'm in a different account. But let's say that we, did X, Y, or Z. I did one. What you can do next is go to, yeah, okay, I'm not even logged in. You can go to Chat GPT and basically be like, here's what the question was. Here was my answer. And then, as you learn big O notation, you can say like, what is the big O notation of this code here? See if you're right, right? And then if you're not, then you say, how did you get, or what is the big O notation? And explain how you got to that answer, right? And so use ChatGPT to teach you that. And then what you can do is you can say, okay, now can you optimize this code and explain to me each thing you changed and why it's more optimal. And then ChatGPT will come and be like, yeah, I did this because blah, 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 blah. And that changed it from O of n squared to O of 1 times time complexity. And so then you're like, okay, cool. And now I'm learning. And then you're like, if I create a hash map, that's better than if I just do XYZ. So use AI, use Bard to do this stuff if you don't want to pay for ChatGPT. Like, absolutely use that stuff to that is where the power of using AI is going to help you for sure. But I would not use Copilot like as you're doing this. If you're doing it in VS Code, if you want to keep it, which I would do probably, is I would just probably write it in VS Code. Don't use Copilot. Like, make yourself learn this stuff, because you're not going to have Copilot whenever you are actually interviewing. Cool. Any other questions? I might go like 5 minutes over if that's okay with you guys. But also, if this isn't information you care about, you can also hop off.
And Will, I just want to throw one thing on there too. Joseph, you made me think of this with your question. Because I'm there, I've been there, for sure. And going on Leak Code, especially, I like it to filter difficulty, but not really difficulty, more importantly, data structures. So if I just want to like focus on like arrays for a little while, I'll try to stack and do 5 or 6 array algorithms, and I'll like group those together, not all of them at the same time, but I'll group 2 or 3 of them together, read the problems, understand the similarities in how I can break them down, just using that one data structure. And that's personally just helped me a little bit as I move along. So
Yeah, it's a great idea. Okay. We got about 10 more minutes. Again, I might go like 5-10 minutes over. But what I want to talk about is the kind of the most important, in my opinion. Something I wish I would have known is you don't have to be and only set yourself up to only be a developer and only look for developer jobs. Now that you have this skill, your opportunities actually are way wider than you thought. There's tons of roles that if you just know a little bit of coding, you can really make a lot of money if that's something you're really interested in. Or if you don't want to be a dev or you don't feel ready yet, there's tons of jobs that even you just have to have a limited knowledge of development and you are now qualified. So there's jobs like a solutions engineer. So if you have any business in sales, or you feel like, hey, you know what, I'm pretty persuasive, or I'm pretty, like, I like to talk to people. I could see myself in sales. Solutions engineer is a great role. What it does is basically you are on the sales side of, you're not a salesperson, but you're on the sales side. You work closely with the salesperson. So let's say you have a customer, you're selling some product, you're selling a database, you work at MongoDB, right? A customer comes, their salesperson gets a customer in the pipeline and they say, okay, here's what we're trying to fix. Here's our issue. You would then be the person that goes in and sort of builds out the prototype of how your product, how MongoDB is going to fix X company's problem and what that looks like. So if you just know a little bit of code, you can go in and then you show them that. And then eventually, I mean, you have your base salary. That's really what's important. And then if they buy, you get a little portion of the commission. You're not tied like a salesperson. But it can be very lucrative. As you can see here, a solution engineer makes $100,000 to $130,000 a year. 135 to 171, 111 to 162. These are all people who are not developers. They just know a little bit either about a product or about technology. They can communicate to a customer, deliver on an example prototype, and that's it. And you can make, I have one of my good friends is a solutions engineer for Snowflake, and they make more money than anybody I know. They're super well off. And he got his degree, I don't even know what he got, communications, I think. Knows a little bit about Python. That's all he uses, Python, a little bit of SQL. but like very like ask me questions. I'm like, what is a class? Yeah, he's making $200,000+. And he's like, what is a class in Python again? And you're like, oh, okay, yeah, let me explain that to you. So you can see that there's plenty of areas, plenty of places or plenty of things for solutions engineer. There's other ones that are, you know, if you get good at it, you can be senior and make 266 a year. But on the back end, there's other ones. So there's like a, I don't know if we'll see if there's customer success engineer. Engineer. Some and just know that there are plenty of jobs or titles can be different. So like they might call it a solutions architect or solutions consultant. Kind of just depends on the company. So just keep that open. But by just having that knowledge, by just having a little bit of knowledge of tech, open up your horizons, you know, look at customer success is like post-sales engineering. So that's what I did at Twilio, right? Where a company like Nike would come in and be like, hey, here's this tool that I'm trying to use of yours. Here's my code. Here's what I'm expecting. And here's the issue. And I would go in and say, cool, actually, the way that this function or this, you know, piece works, it's expecting you to be putting something like this. So try that, see if that in your code base works, but this is the issue or this is the code. And it's just because I knew a little bit about JavaScript and I knew a little bit about, you know, HTTP methods and URL parameters. That was it. That was the entire interview from the technical side. They paid over $100,000. And so I just say that in, you know, don't limit yourself to, I can only, if you want to just be a software engineer, be a software engineer, developer, that's fine. That's great. But there are tons of roles out there where you could be a developer advocate. And so it's somebody who knows tech, but they're great with people and social media. And you can kind of advocate and go teach something. You can be an instructor, right? You can go teach solutions architect stuff at AWS. You can go teach a ton of stuff. There's tons of opportunities. So think creatively. Again, solutions engineer, like customer success engineer. And again, some of those labels are different, but you don't have to just look at developer jobs, especially if you're looking for a job sooner rather than later. Let's say that you're like, hey, financially, I need to go ahead and get something. Don't just limit yourself to software engineer, software developer, kind of expand that out a little bit. You can go work as customer success, where if you like to handle people, you can make, my friend makes well over $100,000 by just managing accounts at a tech company, understands a little bit about the tech stuff, but doesn't really do anything with code, but just has a knowledge of tech. He doesn't even know how to code. He makes over 100 grand. So by having this, you are unlocking a lot of options for yourself, not necessarily just, don't just pigeonhole yourself into just being a developer. Again, if that's your dream, that's great, stick with it. But there are tons of other options out there if you're looking for it. So that brings me to this like financial piece. I want to really preface with this. I'm not a financial advisor. These are my opinions. I don't think maybe I'm legally supposed to say this. I don't know, but I'm just saying it anyway. These are my opinions. My opinions do not reflect Coding Dojo. They do not reflect Colorado Technical. Do not guarantee, nothing I'm saying is guaranteeing you're going to get a job, or you're going to make six figures, none of that. This is just my experience. These are my thoughts. These are my financial kind of tools that I use to negotiate a higher base salary or equity or whatever, things I wish I would have known. When you're jumping into this, it's really challenging. I mean, in Seattle, at least, you can see, you know, you can see ranges, but even in this, right, it's not super helpful because you're sitting here like, okay, I could make either 94,000 or 182. There's a pretty big difference between those, right? $88,000 kind of range. So you might be like, man, it's really challenging for me to understand what I should be expecting to make. One, I would say is don't sell yourself too short, but also don't think too highly of yourself. I also had another friend who was making sub 100,000 and told the company I wouldn't leave unless you paid me 150. And they were like, no, thank you. And he's like, dang it. Like that was, you know, I was like, dog, you tried to up at 60 grand. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but you know, don't just, why are you worth this much money? But there's a great tool. So my favorite tools is called Levels FYI. totally free. You don't have to sign up. You don't have to do anything. Sometimes it might ask you to like, oh, input your salary. You could just say, oh, I'll do this later. And then it still allows you to do this. But what this does is it is a great tool that people can submit what they make. And so you can kind of do it geographically. You can do it by your knowledge base, by company. So if you do get in with like a Microsoft, you can be like, what is other people making, right? And so it's a great tool. Again, it's free. And it has a whole bunch of different things. Whoops. So I'm going to go by location because I'm in Seattle, right? So I'm going to go, okay, Seattle. Here is the software engineer. This is the software engineer median base, all that of Seattle. Now there's a whole bunch of stuff, right? You can see that goes from 172 to 370. Now the median is about 211. This is one thing I want to kind of emphasize is, again, something I wish I would have known. This is what we call total comp, not your base salary. And we're going to talk about that here in a second. But I can say, okay, I'm looking for software engineer, but there's other ones. There's technical program manager. That's if you're running a program and you're on the tech side. Again, because you have a little bit of code, you might be able to do that. You can do product manager. They make a lot of money, and that's just basically overseeing product from start to finish. If you like kind of taking a whole, if you're a big picture person, you want to see a product, okay, here, I'm going to work with the dev team. I'm going to work with the marketing team. I want to work with, you know, UI UX team. I want to work with all these different teams, business, bring it all together. Product manager, product designer would be a great idea for you. Solutions architect, there's sales engineers, again, solutions engineers, same sort of idea. Technical writer, I probably would say stay away from that field only because AI is writing like lots of documentation now. So I don't know how long that one's going to last. But I could be wrong. Program manager, project manager. So there's tons of different roles. And then you go on the business side, you can still do a bunch of different stuff. But let's say we want to do software engineer because let's say that's where we're starting. Greater Seattle area. What you can do, and see, this is where it's like, added mine within the last year. Remind me later. Perfect. What you can do is you can actually filter this and say, and this is where you guys would all go, is you would say entry level and then new offer only, because you guys haven't worked at a company unless you currently work for a company. That's a whole different thing. You can filter by your gender if you'd like, by time or, you know, most recent of the past 2 years or whatever. If you want remote, hybrid, or office, right? And so what this will do is this is somebody here that 20 hours ago received an offer and accepted an offer from an Amazon. If you click on it, oftentimes it will tell you, it can tell you additional information. So employed, so they just started, they're in office, so they have to go in, which is Amazon right now. It's a return to office. Everybody hates it. But you can see that there's also different levels, right? So different companies have different levels. The higher the level, the higher the pay range, also the more responsibility. And there's no like generic like SDE1, because Microsoft calls it something different than Amazon, that calls it something different than Facebook, than Apple, all that stuff. But what you can do is you can come here and say, okay, cool. This person has a year of experience at Chewy, software engineer 1. They're doing API backend work. It's hybrid. So they do have a year of experience and they have a bachelor's degree. Now it doesn't say what it's in, but they do have a bachelor's degree. And so you can take this information and say, okay, what should I expect to pay? So if I'm a developer here, and let's say that I applied to Chewy and they're going to, you know, they want to offer me a software engineer 1 position, right? I have a better idea of what I can ask for because I see what other people are getting paid. Maybe you don't have a bachelor's degree. And so if they come in a little bit lower, then you might say like, okay, that makes a little bit more sense. And because maybe that's something that's important to them. But if they come in at like, you know, $50,000, you can be like, absolutely not, right? It's a way that you can advocate for yourself. And so you can see a bunch of different things. Amazon, it looks like they're on a hiring craze, probably because a lot of people got fired because they didn't want to return to office. But I'm trying to find, sometimes you can see if people like their, you know, what gender they identify as, what ethnicity they are. And then from there, you can kind of, again, see a couple different things, right? About like, okay, what should I expect? Again, this does not mean that you're going to get X, Y, or Z. This just means this is something that you can kind of have in your back pocket. And if they come in super low, you can be like, is this something I'm willing to even entertain, or be like, hey, based off of what I see in the market, this is something that I would encourage, or this is something I'm looking for. Which kind of brings me to my first point. Your first interview, a recruiter is going to ask you this. And I have used this tactic. I've had my past TAs who now are no longer TAs and work at jobs use this tactic, and it will increase. I can almost guarantee, I won't guarantee because I legally can't, but I have seen it increase salaries much, much higher. Your recruiter's instantly going to say, what is your pay range? What is your desired salary? Unless you have a really good knowledge of the company, of the benefits, of the equity structure, and the bonuses, I would say, and this is what I've said, is what other people say, is, hey, that's a wonderful question. I know that total compensation is a little bit more complicated. It's a little bit more complicated portion of the job interview process. If it's okay with you, I'd like to see, I'd like to learn more about the job, about the career, about the expectations, about the other benefits provided before I can give you a total number there. Because if you just come out here and you're like, I want 200,000, bless you, Garrett. I want 200 grand. They're gonna be like, okay, well, what do you justify that at? Blah, 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 blah. But what that does is it buys you a little bit of time. I've never had a recruiter be like, no, you have to tell me right now. You could say that, I know that this is a challenging, kind of more complicated. There's some benefit structures. So if you don't mind, I'd love to learn more about the company, but if you have it available, do you happen to know the pay range for this current position? They might give you that information. They might not. They might be like, oh, let me get back to you on that. But there is just things to think about with that. What it does is it buys you a little bit more time. If you get on to the next round, then all of a sudden, you're kind of interviewing and you're seeing that process, and then you can learn more about the company. You can ask questions of like, what do you guys do for healthcare? How, on average, do you know how much people spend in healthcare? Some companies, a friend of mine's company pays for his and his wife's healthcare, which comes out to about $8,000 a year. So for him, right, he might make a base of 90, but really he's saving $8,000 that he would have had to pay for healthcare. So really his total comp, you can sort of think about it like, well, he's getting $98,000 because he's saving $8,000. If he were to take a job somewhere else that was just 95 base, but he had to pay for his healthcare, he'd actually be losing money, right? He'd actually be making $3,000 in theory less because the benefits are changed. And so those are things to think about. Those are things to talk about. Is, okay, what is your total, benefits package? What, do you have an average price of how much healthcare typically is? There's kind of two routes you can go. You can be really ambiguous. I'm more of the ambiguous, like, hey, this is kind of where I'm currently at. Especially whenever it depends on if somebody comes to you or if, you're going to them. If somebody comes to you and they're offering you and it's like, hey, it would take $20,000 more for me to leave my company. This is where I'm currently at. So unless you guys are in this range, I'm not really interested like that. But if you guys are kind of doing your first job, you don't really have that leverage. But one thing to kind of be cautious about is recruiters will give you a total comp price. Hey, total comp, this is what we're paying you. What does total comp mean? Total comp is total compensation, and it is a combination of your base, which is, you can think base is cash, right? This is your salary as your base pay, your stock, and we're going to get to stock here in a bit, and then your bonus. So they might throw out, like you might see this, let's go back to the first page because it's a big number, right? 343 total comp. They're gonna be like, whoa, dude, your total comp is $343,000. And so you might be like, wow, I'm rich, which you still are, right? This is still a lot of money, but you're actually getting paid 165,000 base salary. So your every 2 weeks or every other, whatever, twice a month, whatever it is this $165,000 number. Now, what they'll also do is throw in this bonus, and that changes. So like an annual target bonus, this is basically if you hit X, Y, or Z, then you can make up to this money. And so that's where this 160, that's still a lot. I mean, that's a huge bonus compared to a lot of these. But you know, this is a little bit maybe more reasonable, is you might have like, okay, a $13,000 bonus. They might say, hey, in order for you to come over, we know, or to start, we want to get you, you know, work from, maybe you're hybrid. We want to give you some work from home money. We want to get you excited, blah, blah, blah. We're going to give you a $10,000 signing bonus. That's a common thing. So you can see the bonus, but they're going to build that into your total comp. So yes, you might get a lump sum payment of $13,250, but, it's just a one-time thing that's not in your salary. So if you're planning for your, you know, month to month, this is what I'm bringing in, you kind of don't really want to deal with this, right? It's think about this is your number, not 175. This is your number here. Okay. Any questions on that so far? And then we're going to get into this vesting schedule, stock equity stuff. And I'm going over. If you guys need to hop off, that's fine. If you guys are finding this valuable, obviously stay. I'm here to talk and answer any questions. But any questions on this so far? Okay. Now, what will happen, and this is not every company, not every company is publicly traded. So there's kind of two ways to think about it. If you have a publicly traded company, so Twilio, I'm just gonna use Twilio, I'll give you my experience. When I got hired, I got offered a base of $105,000, and I can't remember my bonus, but 105,000, and I got $50,000 in equity. And then there was other benefits per month of like $30 a month for reading, for you to get books and to read, $50 a month for your gym. There's other just nuancy things. I don't think I got a bonus from Twilio. But I got 50,000 in equity and 105,000 in base salary to be a customer success engineer, post-sales implementation. This 50,000 is, in my case, it was 50,000, is because Twilio is a publicly traded company. This is how it worked. And this is something I wish I would have known, but I had to like learn on the fly. They take this number, this 50,000, and oftentimes what they'll do is they'll say, okay, your start date is May 1st, let's say. Well, from May 1st to June 1st, we're going to take the average stock price. Sometimes it's average, sometimes it's highest, sometimes it's lowest, depends on the company. The average stock price, and let's say it's $100, right? Well, we're going to take that and say, okay, on average for the first month of your employment, could be 3 months again, it totally depends on the company. We're going to say that the average price was $100. They offered me 50. If it was $100, which I think it was like $100. They will take, after that first month, what they'll do is they will take your equity total. So in my case, $50,000. They will divide it by the amount, the average price. And again, for easy numbers, let's just say 100. And after that month, they will send it to the board and they'll say, okay, great. And it'll get approved because it's just, you know, they don't really care. And they will assign me 500 shares in the company. 500 because they take the 50,000 divided by 100 and it's 500. So I got 500 shares of Twilio stock, right? Which equates at that time around $50,000, right? Again, because stock changes every day, whatever. Now, you don't get that 50,000 immediately, and every company is different, but each company has what we call a vesting schedule. And so this is where there's this idea called golden handcuffs within tech. And this is where it comes, is your vesting schedule is basically you earning your equity that they offer you. And so if you look at this one for, what company is this? Chewy. They've got what they call a 15% cliff. And what that means, and this is pretty common within tech, is you don't get anything until you hit the 1 year mark at Chewy, for this example. And for Twilio, it was a year, and it was actually a 25% cliff. And so I guess let's go back to Twilio because that's just what I'm experienced with. I don't want to speak to Chewy because I don't know their vesting schedule. It was a 25% cliff, meaning I didn't receive any equity until I was there for 1 year. At that 1 year mark, I would get 25% of my 500 shares immediately given to me. They had like an account. They have an account with a tech firm or with a financial firm that would give us disperse our shares and we could kind of do with it what we want. So they would say, okay, at the end of this year, you get 125 shares of Twilio. And that would go into my account and then I could do with it whatever I wanted, right? I could immediately sell that stock. And let's say that that stock went from $100 to $200. Now that stock is worth $25,000, right? And so I can immediately go sell that and I get $25,000. Now, if I sell it within, I think it's 1 year and a day, then I get short-term games tax and there's a whole bunch of different tax implications. And so I'll get taxed pretty heavy on that, but I could still pocket, I don't know, $13,000, $15,000 right out of the gate, right? Once I receive that. Then after you hit your 25% cliff, each quarter, you make 6.25% of your total equity. So each year you're getting 25%. And so each quarter, obviously there's 4 quarters, you get 6.25%. So they would take that 500 and then times 0.0625. And so I would get 31 shares, roughly 31 shares a quarter. And then I could, again, do whatever I wanted with it. I could sell it. I could keep it. If I kept it for more than a year, then I paid less in taxes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. As you can see here, there's incentive for you to stay longer. They might give you this bigger number. In this case, it was 42,000, but they're saying this is your average annual, but your first year, you're only getting 25,000. Now this number, this is your average, but if we look at this, 59 plus 34 plus 50 plus 25, they were offered $168,000 total in equity, right? But they only get 15% at the beginning. Then they get a little bit more year 2. They get a little bit more year 3, and they get the most 35% at year 4. And so what the whole idea is companies want to incentivize you to stay longer. The longer you stay, the more equity you get. If you only stay a year, you only get 25 grand. But if you make it, you know, if you're like, I don't know, I kind of want to leave after year 2, but you're giving up $109,000 in equity. Because the minute you leave, if you don't stay through this, right? If you only stay 2 years, yes, you'd get this 25,000 and 34,000 or whatever that equates to percentage wise. It's really the percent because your stock price can change. So you don't really want to lick off that, but you're giving up 65% of your total offer by leaving the company. And so it sort of incentivizes you like, I'll stick it out 1 more year. Like my best friend works for Google and this is where he's currently at. He's like, if I leave now, I'm literally leaving hundreds of thousands of dollars on the table for equity. But each year, what happens, not that they're evil, this is just how a company works, is maybe you crush it this year and maybe you get a go up from a level 1 to a level 2. Well, that is going to give you more equity. Equity is cheap for companies, right? So maybe they're going to give you another 100,000 in equity. But guess what? Year 2, from this total payout, you're already at this 20%. But let's say at the end of this, you get another 100,000. That 25% cliff starts again. And so now you're at 2 vesting schedules at 2 different times. And they're sort of, again, just kind of keeping you another year, another year, another year. And they'll dangle $400,000 or $500,000 in front of your face, which is great. I mean, that's awesome. If you love the company, stick with it, get the money, stay with equity. But it sort of creates this space where you're like, I don't really want to leave. I don't really want to get, I'm giving up, you know? If you leave after year 2, maybe you got the first 25% of that, but now instead of giving up 109,000, you're giving up $184,000, right? And you're like, oh, I don't want to give that up. I could just stick it out a little bit. And that's just how they keep getting you. It's called the golden handcuffs. Because they keep kicking that can down the road. That's really common. Amazon, I think, was at 5% at their first cliff, and then you get a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. Some companies like Twilio are just like, hey, 25% each year, totally changes. But that's how that works. For me, and it totally depends on where you're at. I did not want, like, I didn't know that if I was going to stay at Twilio for 4 years, which I didn't, right? So it was like, actually, what is important to me is cash. And so what you can do is say, hey, that's great. I really appreciate you're offering me $160,000 in equity. That's awesome. I need a little bit more than 120,000 per year. So, first off, you don't try to give anything. You don't say like, hey, if I give up some equity, can you give me more cash? You just ask for more cash, right? Now, if they come back and they say no, what Twilio did is I wanted more money. And they said, okay, we'll offer you more money, but the way that we do it is we have a ratio, can't remember the ratio, for every 5,000 or every $1,000, that's 3,000 from your equity. And you're like, okay, right? And then it totally depends on what you want. If you're in a great financial space and you're like, no, I believe in this company, I want to stay with this company, I think this is going to be a good financial decision. Great, that's awesome. Shoot for equity, that's great. For me, it was like, no, I actually care less about the equity. I care more about the cash right now because that was the space I was in. My wife was in law school. Like, no, cash is king. Inflation was really kind of beginning. So it's like, no, I'm out. And so I negotiated down and I negotiated my equity down and my salary up. And so it just, again, it totally depends on where you're at in that space and what you're looking for. Now that's equity. These are companies that are publicly traded. There's other stuff. Like if you go to a startup, there's what we call options. Work kind of the same way, but very different at the same time. You can be given options. And what an option is basically if they get purchased or if they go public, you have the option to buy stock at whatever price you entered at. So what do I mean by that? So my best buddy works for that double unicorn big startup. They're going to go public in the next 3 or 4 years. He has a lot of options. He's going to make over $1 million if they go public. And they will. They're worth a lot and they rule. He has the option. He got in at a strike, what we call a strike price of, let's say $10. It's 10 something, but let's say $10. He got a strike price of $10. If they go public, and let's say that their initial offering, they're valued at whatever, and their stock is worth $40. What an option does, and this is why startups can be really beneficial, especially financially, is you can say, cool, here's this stock that's worth $40. Do you want to buy it at 10? And so you would say, well, yeah, that makes sense. And sometimes companies will just basically, if you say yes, they'll take the 10 from the 40 and then kind of do it for you. So there's people that'll do it for you. Or often it's not like you have to come up with the cash. It sometimes can be a transfer. And sometimes you do have to come up with the cash. It's not like your options just go away. But if you don't have $60,000, $80,000 lying around, then, which most people don't, you might be like, cool, I want to buy $10,000 worth it because I know that's immediately worth $40,000, right? And then you can do with it what you will. You could sell it. You can do all kinds of stuff. And that's where the startup money can really come in handy. But those are options. And so you get a strike price, kind of similar to the average price here. It's usually when a company does like their series funding, they'll do, series A, B, B plus, C. And then at the end, they'll have a valuation. And then from that valuation, that's when you get your strike price based off how many options are out there. So it's kind of a whole thing. But if you get options, that's kind of what it means. It's just saying, hey, if the company's offering you options, you want to know what your strike price is. Because if your company increases, again, it's worth $40 per share, you have a strike price of $10 a share, you're 4xing your money immediately, which is awesome. Now, on the other hand, options don't mean anything. If your company goes under, if your company never goes public, if your company never gets bought, they're just kind of there. Because your company's valuation, though they might be valued at something, don't have necessarily a economic value. And so often, again, if your company goes public or they get purchased, that's another way that if they get purchased, you get, it kind of immediately fulfills. The options do have a vesting schedule as well. but it is a way that you can kind of, once you get purchased, even if you've only been there for 3 months and you or a year and you have XYZ, then all of your options are fulfilled because the company's buying that, and then you get them, whatever price they paid for it. So working in a startup can be advantageous for that, but again, your startup has to go public or it has to get purchased, or else you're kind of not really worth. Your options are great in theory, but they're not worth anything. It's like monopoly money to an extent. But negotiate that stuff. That everything is negotiable. And now, obviously, if they have like a company policy of $50 a month per gym, they might not do that. But like, hey, I'm hybrid. I don't really have a workstation that's set up great. Can you guys get me some monitors? Do you have any sort of like at Twilio? I think I had $1,600 to set up my work from home. No, it was $1,600 to set up my work from home station. Get monitors, chairs, keyboards, all that stuff. They'll give you a computer, all that stuff. So everything is negotiable to an extent, but again, it depends on where you're at and what you're looking for. But use this tool to look and say, okay, again, realistically, if they're offering you a base salary of 115 or 120, if you see these numbers, you're like, no way, I'm getting, gypped. And it's like, no, actually 120 based off of your, based off of where you're at, or if you have any experience, XYZ, then that might be kind of where you're at. Or maybe it's low. Maybe they're offering you 105 and you're like, whatever. Then you can come back and say, hey, based off of my research with other organizations, I think actually somewhere around 125 is much more of a approachable price. Same thing with kicking the can down the road with a recruiter. If you say, hey, this is a great idea, or it can be kind of, there's a lot of stuff going on here. I'd love to see and hear more about the job, and then I can make that decision. Use this tool. So when you get to that down the road and they say, okay, have you thought about salary? You use this to be like, okay, great. Yeah, you're offering me an SDE1, software developer 1, or somewhere kind of entry level based off of my research. And the companies around my area, I can see that total comp is around $175,000 or $180,000. And that's something that I'd like to get to. Where a base, I'd like to have a base around 130, 140, or whatever, kind of whatever is up to you. You can do that. And just know this is the last thing I'll say. I know that we're 25 minutes over. Your first offer, they are expecting you to counter. They are expecting you to counter. So you do not have to, and I've hired people that I knew, okay, once they counter, hopefully they counter for blank, here's my limit. I'm gonna offer them this. When I led a team of software engineers, I offered a guy $5,000 or $7,000 less than what I was like agreed upon my max to go to. And I was like, yeah, I would absolutely pay him this. And now you might ask, like, why didn't you just pay him that? Well, because I'm expecting him to offer. That's kind of how it works. He didn't, he just accepted the job. And I told him a little bit later on, I was like, hey man, I would have given you an extra 5. And then obviously after a year, we made up for it. But they're expecting you to counter. So your first job offer does not have to be one that, you don't have to just take it. You can counter as long as it's not egregious. If they're offering you $100,000 and you're wanting, no, I want $200,000, it's probably not going to happen, right? You're not even close. You can say, hey, it doesn't feel like we're close. I'm really thinking somewhere around 130 based off of everything else. Is that, we're pretty far off. Is there any way we can meet somewhere around there? You can also take time. They could be like, oh, we want to fill it today. You say, hey, give me a day to think about it, 2 days to think about it. Let me talk to my partner, my friend, myself, give me some time. So you are in control of all that. I had one more thought, but I can't think about it. I can't remember it. So, all right. Are there any questions about the money, the finances, anything that we've talked about? I know we went for a little bit long today. I just want you guys to succeed and have as much as you can. But are there any questions? Was this helpful? Was this hurtful? Does it stress you guys out?
I got a question for you, Will.
Yeah, hit me.
And I don't want to have you go on a tangent or anything, but
Sure.
specifically with some of the job careers you were talking about, with customer service specialists, or not specialists, but customer success, and solutions architect, things of these natures, along with some of those jobs that aren't directly development related. Are there any sort of like courses or certifications you know of that directly tie along with something such as working, at AWS solutions architect, things like that? Is
Yeah.
there anything off the top of your head that you think of?
Yeah, great question. A lot of these jobs, especially solutions engineers jobs, working at Snowflake, at MongoDB, they'll have Salesforce is a big one. They'll have their own certifications. Now, I would say you can get really caught in getting certs, getting certifications, cert. Unless like you're like, no, my goal is to work at Snowflake or Salesforce, and that's what I want, then dive in. Sure, go ahead, do that, get some certs because that can help you with this job. I have the certification. I'm really interested in it. Other ones like AWS, if you're interested in being like a solutions architect, solutions engineer, solutions instructor, or cloud instructor, yeah, doing something like a solutions architect certification will be helpful. The only thing I would just say is be wary of being in kind of what we call like cert hell, where you're just constantly getting new certs, but you're not increasing your journey, right?
Sure.
Not really increasing your job, but you are the most certified blank, right?
Right,
So
right.
that would be my thing is really, unless you find a company, unless again, it's like, though, I really want this job. I think I would fit great. Let me look into this. Or this is really a company whose ethos I just align with. I would say there's a lot of jobs out there that don't require you to know everything about their product, or they'll say, we'll teach you about our product. We just need to know that you know a little bit about code. You can hold a
Right.
Yeah.
Well, a quick little follow-up on that is what you mean by, you gave the example of like Salesforce might have their own like in-house certs, so to speak.
Mhm.
So does that mean, would you kind of deconstruct that and see what Salesforce requires and then go for that cert? Or are you meaning that upon the interview and successful completion in the interview, kind of their ramp up program might be, hey, let's get you certified? I
Yeah,
don't
great
think that would
question.
make
Yeah, and well, both, right? Both can happen. People can teach you. People can learn anything. Look what we learned in the last 9 weeks, right? Like you guys went from knowing
right,
nothing about React to learning a whole bunch of stuff about React. I would say that again, if you need a job immediately, I would probably refrain from getting company specific certifications, unless it was like an AWS cloud practitioner. I think it's a great cert. I think most people should get that in tech because it's just all about the cloud. Or Azure, AZ 900, both are kind of synonymous to me. Those are great certs. I would say things like if you wanted this niche Snowflake or Salesforce or Tableau certification, um, sometimes and it depends on the job, right? If it says one of the requirements is that you're certified in X, but you're like, this is the job I'm really going for, or I know somebody, I think that'd be another way that if somebody's like, hey, I'm happy to refer you, but it requires this cert and I can knock it out in a week. It's like, cool, I already have this in. Let me go get certified in this tech and this technology. I probably wouldn't just look for a company again, unless it's my dream company. Like I want to work at Apple, right? And Apple requires this cert for this position, then maybe I'd do it. If not, I would hold off because, like you said, some companies will say, hey, you know what? We can just hire you. But and then teach you that. But again, really, for me, and this is all just my opinion, unless somebody was like, hey, I'll give you a referral, but this is a requirement, I'm probably not going to waste my time on a company specific or product specific certification.
sure. Okay. Thanks.
Yeah. Because you could get hired and they could be like, okay, cool, go learn this. Like that's going to be on the onboarding. You're going to have to learn the ins and outs. Even Twilio, when I got hired for Segment, which is a company bought by Twilio that handles data, after my first month, I didn't even do any of the job. It just said, we want you to learn our product. That was my entire first month. Was just going through trainings and learning all about the product. So that's, I didn't know anything. Now, obviously, for the interview process, you want to be able to speak to Segment, or you want to be able to speak to the product. So don't like know nothing about it. You don't have to go
Right.
spend 12 hours, 20 hours, 25 hours getting certified in it. That makes sense.
Sure. Definitely.
Yeah.
Thanks for elaborating on that.
Yeah, of course. Anybody else have any other questions? I know we've gone way over, but hopefully this was helpful. Was this helpful to you guys? Or not really? Is anybody still listening? For my
Hey,
white
well,
noise.
thanks. This is Johnny. Thanks. That was super insightful. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, cool.
Thank you. And thanks for the last 9 weeks. As you said, it's been it's crazy the journey we went on. So I appreciate your time, and Garrett, you too. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks,
Of
Johnny.
course, thanks you guys for being here.
Yeah.
Yeah. First of all, thank you so much for this class. It has been absolutely awesome. You two have been phenomenal. And for in regards to today's conversation, yeah, I found it pretty helpful. Funny enough, used to work as an account manager at a software company, and I work with solutions architects all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like the tactics that you were talking about in terms of negotiation, that was something I often struggle with any job that I applied to for any position. So this was
Yeah.
very, thank you.
Yeah, of course. Joseph, use those if you've got that, like my only encouragement, if you've got that in, maybe companies have left. That's another thing. People move companies all the time. And not that you should use people, that's not what I'm trying to say, but just think about networking and maybe somebody in this class. Maybe right now somebody doesn't have a job, but they might work for Microsoft in 3 years. And if you guys are friends and you were kind and you networked with them and you go, hey, Omar, I see you're at Microsoft. I would love to be at Microsoft. I've been doing XYZ at Chewy. Any chance you can give me a referral? Omar might be like, oh yeah, Joseph, you've been super kind to me. Or you were really cool. I remember you. Sure, I'll network and I'll give you a referral. So just always think through that stuff. Don't want to burn too many bridges because people move jobs. And this is the last thing, I promise this is the last thing. It's very common for people to move jobs after 18 months. That is the average time. Because you might stay with the company and they'll give you a 10% pay increase or 6% pay. You can move a job and get 25%. That is part of the tech world. Do I agree with it? No, I've been with Coding Dojo for 3 years, right? But that is super part of it. So especially it's the hardest thing to get the first job, but after that, it's a lot easier. So cool. Well, with that, I will stop the recording. This will be up on our class calendar. That will be